This video is a brief introduction to nominalization. In this short video, we'll learn 4 key things. First, what is a noun group? Second, what is nominalization? Third, when and why do we use nominalization? And finally, how does nominalization relate to the typical differences between spoken and written language? First, in order to understand nominalization, we need to understand what a noun group is. A noun group is a group of words that relate to or expand a noun. For example, we can have very short, simple nouns such as airplane. We can expand those nouns to noun groups such as large airplane. We can further expand them to longer noun groups such as the large airplane that arrived late. Another example would be poem. We can expand that to her poem or the beautiful poem that she wrote. And so nouns can be expanded to longer noun groups as you see in these examples. Now that you have an idea of what a noun group is, how does it relate to nominalization? Nominalization is the act of changing verbs, adjectives, and even entire clauses into nouns or noun groups. For example, on the left we have a clause, the plane leaves at 9 o'clock. On the right we have the noun group version, the plane's 9 o'clock departure. Similarly, we have a clause, she wrote this poem. And the noun group version is her writing of this poem. And so you can see that you can transform virtually any clause into a noun group. Now, why would we want to do that? Well, very broadly speaking, it comes down to the difference between simple or concrete ideas in language versus more complex, abstract versions of language. Let's imagine you were trying to explain something to a child. Let's imagine you were explaining to them the process of photosynthesis. And so you would provide this child a very concrete explanation given their age. You might say something like, the plants drink the sun and grow bigger, and use simple nouns to convey your point. However, if you were talking to an academic or a scientist, you would likely be providing more abstract academic explanations. For example, photosynthesis is a process used by plants and other organisms to convert light energy into chemical energy that can later be released to fuel the organism's activities. Here's a simple example of how a simple noun that is quite concrete and easy to imagine can be expanded in an increasingly abstract way to encompass more and more complex ideas. So on the left we have a simple elephant. On the second picture we have animal captivity, a picture of an elephant in chains. And now we have the concept of an elephant, but not just an elephant, but animals in general, as well as the concept of captivity. So thinking about animals that are kept against their will in captivity. And finally, on the far right, we have animal captivity protest. So now we're combining the first 2 concepts that we had with the idea of a protest of people that are arguing and fighting for the rights of these animals and arguing for their freedom. And so on the far left, we've got concrete, moving all the way to the very abstract on the right. And this is at the heart of what we're trying to do when using nominalization. Packing extremely abstract, complex ideas into smaller noun groups that we can then connect and link with other ideas. It basically enables us to communicate efficiently between one another. But of course we need to be careful because understanding these noun groups requires a lot of knowledge and context on the part of the reader. So we need to be careful and be mindful of our audience. Now that we have a general idea of what nominalization and noun groups are, how do they relate to spoken and written language? Here's an example of spoken language. Environmental pollution has been increasing around the world, and governments are becoming concerned. Let's imagine if we wanted to write that out. Well, the written version might look like this. The worldwide increase in environmental pollution has been causing concern among governments. So you probably notice a couple of differences. First, which one is longer? The spoken version is slightly longer. Which one contains more verbs? Well, the spoken version also contains more verbs. We've got has been increasing and are becoming concerned. Whereas in the written version, all we have are has been causing. So that's a key difference between them. So we can see the spoken version is a bit longer and more verb-centered, whereas the written version you can see that it's a lot more noun-centered or noun group-centered and less verb-centered. So to summarize those two examples, the spoken version involves concrete entities and is more verb-centered. The concrete entities are environmental pollution, the world, governments, and the verb-centered part would be has been increasing and are becoming. In the written version, there are more abstract entities and it's more noun group-centered. So the abstract entities or noun groups could be the worldwide increase in environmental pollution. And so that we can see that those clauses in the spoken version have been nominalized, as we saw in our earlier examples as well. Here's another example. In this spoken version, it says, Germany invaded Poland in 1939. This started World War II. In the written example, or nominalized version, we have Germany's invasion of Poland in 1939 was the start of World War II. So we can see here that we've got two separate sentences or two clauses that both include a verb at their center, invaded and started, and these verbs have been turned into nouns in the written version, invasion and the start of. So again, we see how spoken language, when it becomes written language, tends to nominalize, turn words into nouns in the effort to pack that information more concisely into smaller amount of space. Try your own example. Look at these two sentences and try to tell me which one is the spoken version and what is the written version. Also, how do you know? Which one is more verb-centered and contains more verbs, and which one contains more nouns or longer noun groups to convey the message? As you saw in the preceding examples, each example turns the verbs of the sentences into nouns. So we have the band performed wonderfully, and so the verb performed. And in the written version, we have the band's wonderful performance. Nominalization condenses writing, allowing us to be more concise with our words. But again, it all depends on your audience. If you're trying to communicate an idea to a young child, of course you need to be more concrete and verb-centered. However, as you develop from a novice academic writer to an increasingly mature, sophisticated academic writer in university, there is an increasing expectation for you to be able to both understand and produce more and more nominalized language. And so nominalization is an essential tool to both understand and be able to use in your journey as an academic writer.